Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. Welcome to the show. We're really glad that you're here, whether you're watching us live or if you're listening to us later on. We really appreciate that you chose to tune in.
Boy, that's for sure. Want to remind everybody, Voice of Indie podcast on blogtalkradio.com immediately following our show. Don't know who the guest is going to be this week as we're pre-recording this, but at the end of our show today, stay tuned or hang in there for the very end, and we have a little short film on how to actually reach that show. Host Beam Weeks and Steve and Gary G's are going to entertain you. Episode Rewind this coming Saturday at 5:30 p.m. A.G. Fletcher, he's a Canadian author, believe it or not. This is Canadian week, I think.
It is.
And
we have a Canadian author tonight.
Yeah, and that's episode 26. And then next Wednesday is another Canadian author,
Really?
Jen Braxma. She wrote Evangeline's Heaven, which I happen to have a copy of right here, Evangeline's Heaven.
Oh, yeah, that's
Jen
a really
Braxma.
good book. That's a fantasy book.
Yep, it's good versus evil, basically, and hopefully good wins. But that'll be next Wednesday, November 30th at 7 p.m. here in the U.S. And I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow, for here in the U.S. anyway.
It's an American Thanksgiving tomorrow.
That's right. And
that's why this is a pre-record, amongst other reasons.
There you go.
Yeah.
And tonight's guest is Douglas Gardham, and he's coming to us from Canada, British Columbia as well. I wonder if he even knows Jen. He might.
Yep.
Who knows? We'll find out.
Because Vancouver's such a small hometown, right?
There you go. But she's from Ottawa, so
she is.
Who knows? I don't know. We'll find out. We can ask Doug.
Let's bring Doug on.
Come on in, Doug. Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, Doug.
I'm doing great. How are you? Thanks for having me on, Joan and Rob.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for being on. If it weren't for people like you, we wouldn't have a show. There'd just be the two of us talking, and nobody wants to hear that.
And a blank screen next to us, and we could keep asking questions and stuff. But no, so you probably don't know Jen, do you?
I do not.
No. Well, since you're both writers, I thought, well, maybe you might. I mean, it's possible.
Did you say she was from Ottawa?
Ottawa.
Yeah.
I did go to school in Ottawa.
That's why you had mentioned that in the pre-show, so that's why I wondered that. But she's a writer and a book coach. She's spent 10 years as a journalist. So.
Yeah, we just found out that Doug's sister is living in Arlington right now, right? Arlington, Massachusetts.
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. So
Small
we had
world.
Yes, it
After
is. Worked hard to get rid of my Boston accent too.
Boy, that's for sure.
And I did a good job.
You did a great job.
You cannot hear it. I cannot hear that. You have an accent at all.
If I get excited, any kind of really big emotion, forget it. It's right back to Boston.
Okay.
For all the places we've lived in the United States, that's kind of...
They kind of... Yeah, that's
right?
true. That is true.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Doug. How'd you get started writing? What brought you into that?
Writing probably came to me, I'm going to say, when I was a kid. As a teenager, I got kind of started in music and wanted to play a lot of music and started to actually write music, and found that I was kind of in that connection with Elton John and Bernie Taupin. And I always thought it's neat how Taupin would write the lyrics and Elton would put music to them. And so I started to practice that. And then I began writing the lyrics from that perspective, and poetry kind of emanated from there. And I just kind of kept it going. I actually kind of took a diversion from that for my career and went to school. That's where the Ottawa connection came in. Went to school in Carleton to become an engineer. And most of my career has been in that engineering, manufacturing, corporate world. But one of the things that kind of stuck with me in my mid-20s was this creative thing that actually just wouldn't let me go. And so I started doing short stories, because that kind of moved, I think, from poetry and doing lyrics. I continued to write songs because that was a part that I really enjoyed doing. But then I started to kind of figure, like, I need to do something in some way that I can kind of keep this going. And I read a little bit of the Stephen King biography, and he'd write a page or 2 pages a day. And I think actually it was 2 pages a day. And I began to see, like, I could not do that and have my job. So I would get up like at 5:30 and began to write a page a day. And I did that for years. It just became part of my routine. And then as you kind of go through your career, your professional career and different things, and having a family, eventually came to a point where I want to write a book. And so that's how it kind of came together. So The Actor, which we'll probably talk about today, really was, I'll call it, in essence, the outcome of that over probably a 10-year period. And I just began to write a page a day. That's all I could manage before I would go to work. And kind of that's where it kind of shifted when The Actor came out, became published. That's when I decided to make this was going to become what I do. And so since about 2013, when The Actor came out, that's what I've done. And I do this full time now. So in essence, that's a quick kind of capture of how it kind of came about. I've just found that somehow or other, a pen and a piece of paper, when I have them in my hand or I find them, I just write. So I still will write lyrics and things like that, jot notes down. And I primarily write on a MacBook now as far as what I'm writing, but that's kind of how it all came together.
That's a little more efficient. Right? And writing it down with your pen and paper, I mean, the notes are great, but if you try to write it all out then you got to put it onto the computer anyway, so you might as well bite the bullet, right?
Yeah.
It's a very strange thing. I find that between because I will still hand write different parts of what I'm writing when I'm writing a book. And I find that I go, things happen differently than they do when I'm doing them on the screen. And
right.
So, and it's not an intentional thing. It's just like, sometimes I'll feel, I need to write this part with my hand. And I'm not articulating those words. It's just that I pick up a pencil and start to write. And I don't know what that is. It's just how it kind of comes together. And I will still find myself pulling out a pad and writing like a couple of pages in a part that I'll come back and put in the book that I've been writing on the screen.
Right.
We actually do that. We do. Yeah. I do dialogue that way. Mm-hmm. I have to do dialogue handwritten. I don't know why. I really do. It just makes it easier for me to do dialogue.
Interesting. I find dialogue is one of those things that's an interesting. I love the movies and have forever. Mm-hmm. And I find the movies help me enormously with dialogue, because it's almost like you practice it out loud as you're going through it to see. I think Steinbeck said something to that effect years ago, was to do dialogue properly, you have to read it out loud.
You do. And I need to see it to see how it's playing out. I don't know why I do it. I mean, you can see it on the computer, but like you're saying, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as writing it out. And I know our audience always asks this. Are you a plotter or a pantser or a hybrid?
Probably I would say a hybrid.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
We are too.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I just from the way you're talking, I already know this. Your characters take over, right? And they decide how the story's going to go. You'll have it in your head. This is where we're going. And then the characters are going, right?
What I found so interesting is like the experience that writing has brought to me. Those things come out that way, right? Like, and then somebody will articulate that. Is like you let your character drive where your story's going.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going like, yeah, that's what I did, but I didn't think of it like that. And I think the same way with the storyline. And I often find that the experience that are going around on me find their way into my work as well. Sometimes it's a little too abrupt, and that's why the editing process is pretty important.
Right.
But I just find that there's days I wonder, like we often say, well, we control what we think. And I really struggle sometimes to think that, like, I don't know that I do. Like, where do thoughts come from? I just don't know where they come through. So I don't feel like I'm working alone.
I know that our characters are real people. They're not real people, but they are real to us. Yes. And we know who they are. You know what I mean? You know how they think, you know how they, because we created them, but they become real and have real personalities, and they'll get stuck. And like Caleb always says, if you have writer's block, it's because you're asking your characters to do, Caleb Pirtle, he says it's because you're asking your characters to do something that they would not do. And if someone puts that in a TV show or a movie or a book, it takes you, the watcher or the reader, right out of the story. Yeah.
No, it's very true. And I think it's probably a difficult thing to actually even grasp. But I do think that's where it falls apart. Like, it definitely, that's not how that character was supposed to behave.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you know it as the watcher or the reader, that you're like, nope, that doesn't ring true. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up on characters, because often I've been asked is, are your characters someone that you know or you think acquainted with?
Yeah.
And I've never written that way. Like, I've just
we haven't either.
No. And it's I find it's kind of an interesting thing. Well, they wrote this according to who this person was, and I don't. They seem to be an accumulation of experiences and characteristics of people, right? That just, like you said, they come out of you, though. Like they're somewhere inside you.
Yeah.
So what's the premise of The Actor? Can you give us a synopsis without giving away any plot?
The Actor is really, it's a story of a young man's journey of self-discovery in overcoming the trauma of a personal tragedy in his life, which he does in a somewhat unique way by chasing a dream and kind of the Globe and Mail call it, that's Canada's national newspaper here. It's kind of like the New York Times for the US, but they call it a bizarre David Lynch-like thriller about obsession, delusion, and determination.
Yeah.
And so when I kind of heard that, I was very, obviously, to have your work compared to David Lynch is spectacular.
There you go.
Yeah.
But the big part for me was the fact that they got what the story was about.
Well, that's wonderful.
And that's, to me, what it's like, because originally the concept of the book was, and that's why we're all actors, right? The great Shakespearean said that all the world's a stage.
A stage, and everyone an actor in it. Yep.
And I'm so fascinated by the movie world, and I'm also so fascinated by actors themselves, because I don't actually think they control it. I think it's just in them, the great ones. And that's where the book started to kind of come from. And then it became, and again, I'm very careful on spoilers, so I won't.
Don't.
Good.
But I often say, is anything what it seems? And that's kind of holds as a theme for the whole book.
Sounds really good. Do you think we have time to go through a quick synopsis of the drive-in?
Yeah.
So the drive-in is, I had been trying to figure out how to do, I originally it started where I wanted to publish a couple of short stories. And my publisher said, well, why don't you do a collection?
Oh.
And so I started to throw this around, and I just wasn't satisfied with just putting a bunch of short stories together. And so this concept had come to me years ago when I was driving to work. So the idea here is you ride along with the person who's driving to work, and what they pass by, we, the reader, get to find out what's going on inside. Those are the short stories.
Oh,
that's an interesting
I
idea.
like that.
And the narrative of the story is a person driving to work who has their own issues. It was kind of almost in a bit of a way autobiographical, of going to work every day to the corporate store. And when you're driving to work by yourself most of the time, you think about these things, and you think about your life, you think about your career. And so as you drive along, you get that full story of Tom Johnson is the character's name in this case, and what he's thinking about, which actually has a beginning and middle and an end. And along the way, he doesn't get to know what's going on in these places. Only the reader does. But he sets it up by looking out his window at a house with a light on or something to that effect. And that's how the drive-in really comes together.
Wow, that's a cool idea.
So now it is a very cool idea. Now I have to ask you this, because I've probably said this to him a million times. Like, we'll be driving along and I'll either say something like, okay, every one of those houses has people in it. Every one of these cars has people in it. You know, what are they doing? Where are they going?
Where are they going?
I don't know if that's a writer thing. Like, you're constantly like, you know.
You look at all the cars on the freeway and you say,
where are they all going?
why aren't they at work? Where are these people going?
There's a good reason why we are not.
Yeah.
But why are they?
We're,
but yeah, and you look at homes, and we drive through the country and you see farms, and you're like, who lives there? What do they do? Are they real farmers? Is it an agricultural company took it over, or are these people working the land themselves? I mean, I love that. So I love that not only does your driver who's driving to work going through all of his stuff in his head, which, you know, we all do when we're doing the dishes or whatever. It's like, ooh.
And here I thought this was about a drive-in theater.
It's the drive.
The drive in.
It's interesting, Rob, that you bring that up, because it's kind of a double take on that from the point of view of how the book is set up. Because the book is actually set up like a drive-in marquee. And so each of the short stories on the chapters are actually what you would think of as the movies that are at the drive-in. So a Dusk Till Dawn drive-in movie theater has like 6 movies, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I often can find out when someone's read the book because they talk about drive-in movie theaters. And of course, it's not really about drive-in movie theaters at all. It's just the setting.
I haven't read it.
And that's why I said it just was one of those things that, like, well, this is my chance to write this book. And so that's kind of, and I thought it was a fairly unique way to bring short stories together. So.
It is. It's wonderful. A really great idea. I really.
So that
like
book was actually, the rights for it for podcasting were bought, and they made a scripted podcast, which I participated in, out of it. That was released on Apple and different things. And it's down now, but it came out about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And that was pretty exciting to see how that, because it became very visual.
Yeah.
I hear that often from people who write about the books, is they, like the actor, for instance, they said, like, this just reads like a movie. It's hard to believe that I didn't just see a movie and reading the book. So, which makes me happy because it's called The Actor. So,
yeah.
So the actor and the musician both are award-winning books, right?
Let's see. Let's
say again.
They're award-winning. You won awards.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, both of those from my publisher were awarded the Star Book Award as individuals. The musician is actually a sequel to The Actor.
Oh, good to know.
It continues the story of Ethan Jones. That's the main character in the story, and from coming out of the first book, you find, like, obviously reading the book, you find out what happens to him, and the musician is carrying that on in a, I'll call it a musical world of going on the road to become a musician with a plot. So it continues on, like, struggling as a creative person, and how that struggle happens even within a family, and how that continues on. And then some of the past from the actor comes back to haunt Ethan, and that's how the musician kind of continues on.
Okay.
But there's a lot of music in it. There's a lot of like life on the road as a musician, as well as recording, like trying to put that all together while the plot continues on.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned in the pre-show that you did some lyric writing, right?
Yeah.
Are those lyrics in
He
the
mentioned
musician?
it in the show too.
So it's interesting that you said that, but there are actual songs in the musician that were written, that I wrote.
That
And
you did.
I have included some of the lyrics in that book, yes.
That's cool.
That is way cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. We need to break for our
Sponsors.
sponsorship here. So when we come back, we're going to let everybody know where to reach Doug and have the book giveaway and finish talking about these books as well.
And I do want to say, again, this is a pre-recorded show, so if you're making comments and you're not understanding why we're not putting them up on the screen and we're not answering any of your questions, this is a pre-recorded show. It's live, but it's pre-recorded.
It's a brand new episode.
Yes.
All righty, so we'll be back in just a minute. Stand by.
So, you wrote a book. What now? It's time to make the choice between self-publishing and finding a publisher. Texas Sisters Press is a family-owned publishing company. We are also authors and avid readers. We can guide you through the entire process and will make sure your work is treated with the utmost respect. Where to start? Visit TexasSistersPress.com and click on the Submissions tab. Make sure you read the entire page. You'll find out what we can do and what we won't do. If you think we're a good fit for you, it's time to contact us. Texas Sisters Press. Quality books for the family.
They thought the siren was dead. In the novel Siren Song by author George Dismukes, James Harmon shot her twice. Several people saw her dead body sinking slowly into the abyss. But now, in Siren Song 2, evidence suggests that she may still be alive.
She killed that boatload of people. It was her! She's just getting started.
Angie, that's impossible.
The cold chill up my spine tells me it's not impossible. We've got to start all over again. And this time, do it right.
Siren Song 2. The story continues. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Get your copy today.
At Indie Booksource, you can shop by genre or by author, and you will be buying direct from the author's main purchase link. We offer hundreds of titles in formats that include ebooks, paperback, hardbound, and audiobook. Support an indie author. Visit indiebooksource.com today.
And we're back.
Yes, and I have a cough. So sorry.
That's okay.
Don't worry, it's not COVID, it's allergies.
But you won't
None of you
catch
could
on
catch it anyway. Sorry.
Alrighty, so
I did want to say I just finished reading Siren Song 2. I know this is a pre-record, so hopefully by now, George, I've given you a review, and it was an excellent book, better than the first book even, which I didn't think was possible. And I finished The Mahjong Murders by Linda Purtle, also an excellent book.
right. Excellent. Recommended reading.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see here. Let's take a look at some of your contact information here so people know how to reach you. Your website is www.douglasgardham.com, and that's DOUGLASGARDHAM.com. Douglas Gardham.
Sorry, folks. All right. His Twitter is at Douglas Gardham, and Rob just spelled it, so he's good.
I remember how to spell. That's great.
His Facebook is Douglas Gardham. He's made this so easy for you to get in touch with him.
For sure.
Instagram is at Douglas_Gardham. LinkedIn is Douglas Gardham. YouTube is Douglas Gardham. Look up his YouTube. Watch what he has on there.
And subscribe.
And subscribe, please.
Definitely.
And
Like
subscribe
and
to ours, too. Like and subscribe, for real.
Yep.
Now, you ready to do the book giveaway?
I am ready to do the book giveaway.
All right. The email is douggardham@gmail.com.
Okay, and so we have the book giveaway is the first 3 people to email douggardham@gmail.com will win an ebook copy of a book of choice. So any one of the 3. And I'll tell you what, this is a pre-record, so even if you're listening or watching this a day or 2 later, or even a week later, or even weeks later, go ahead and enter. You don't know if all the books have been given away, so or whether he's in a generous mood and wants to give away more. You never know, right? So go ahead. I know Doug would love to hear from you no matter what. So.
Yeah. Now, you do have a new book coming out that you're working on right now. It doesn't have a working cover yet, but it does have a working title. If you could read my mind, do you want to give us a little synopsis of that?
I can. I haven't spent a lot of time talking about this at this point in time.
Oh, goody.
But like The Drive-In, it is a unique collection of short stories.
Oh.
And if you can imagine being in prison and being charged and convicted of a heinous crime, and you're stuck in a cell basically for indefinitely, what do you do to survive? And the story then, this particular story, if you could read my mind, has the character going into his mind and beginning to imagine a world that is in his head. And he gets, in that chance, he gets to see different people as he goes on what he calls walks through a neighborhood that he's created in his head. And some of the different people he passes, he gets to read their minds and knows what their stories are. And those become the short stories.
Interesting.
And again, like The Drive-In, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. It's a longer book than The Drive-In, but it takes you through his thoughts that go from, I'll say, everything from the ancient text of, I'll call it the Bible, through to the unconscious, and how far you can go into your mind to believe what might be there.
In your mind.
In his mind. Yes, correct. Okay. I just became fundamentally curious of what do you do when you are like basically contained in a very small space, and how do you, and you have a very working mind. How do you deal with that?
How would you cope with it? Yeah.
And the coping way he did that was going into his mind. His background, his father was a neurologist, so he has a lot of the mind in the background, and that's what the story follows through. Without giving anything away.
It's the same thing, I think, with a stroke victim that can't speak. They're in their mind.
They're captured.
They're a prisoner in their own mind.
Yep.
I remember when his grandmother had a stroke. Mm-hmm. And so I would say what I felt she wanted to say to him, and then he couldn't talk to her because he was too upset. And so then I would tell her what he wanted to say. So I was actually having a two-way conversation with myself as his grandmother and as him. But
and you know what? I think that's another storyline, right?
Yeah, there you go.
I know that I was correctly saying what she wanted to say because she would cry.
Fascinating.
Yeah. But that's like, as you can tell, I talk a lot. So for me to not be able to talk, that's my prison.
I think that it has to be a challenge. Like it has to be something that you have to deal with, and so that's what I started to focus on, and it does cover a lot of different things, from the point of view of our experience as a human being, right? But it's imagined.
Cautionary tale: don't do anything that is going to cause you to be imprisoned.
So one of the things that I think is a theme that goes through most of my books is the fact that nothing is what it seems to be. And we're in an age that's very much like that.
Boy, that's
from the standpoint of what we're presented with and what actually really happened.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
I think you're
and that's why I think the movies demonstrate that. I think the news, now our social media world, we get to create things that are not connected at all. And it grows more and more all the time for what that is. And when you look at for myself, our minds that are just so powerful from what we kind of even understand about them, it's like stepping into that world of the unconscious. I mean, I'd read a Cormac McCarthy paper. I quite enjoy reading his work. He is apparently works as a consultant to the Santa Fe Institute, and he had written this non-scientific, because he's a fiction writer. You're familiar with him, but he wrote this paper called the Kukuli problem. And Kukuli was became, I think, recognized as one of the leading chemists of the time, but he was trying to come up with the structure of the benzene ring, which is a circular structure. And he had a dream of a snake swallowing its own tail. So that dream, then he said, that's the structure from benzene. And so from there it went forward. So what Cormac did in his essay was he stretched that to say that language descended on us. It's not biological. It descended on us. And we think it's there for us to communicate with one another like we're doing in our interview here today. But the 5,000 other mammals do quite well without a language. And there's a lot of talk about this now I'm finding in the academic areas around language really being there for us to be able to understand what the unconscious is trying to tell us. And so that's where it kind of extended. So that thought also permeated much of what I was writing about, and if you could read my mind.
So when are you expecting that to be finished and be out available to everybody?
So Rob, it's finished. It went to my agent last Friday.
Ooh, okay.
So he's now going to actively see where we can land it. And we're hoping that we'll get something out of that.
You'll have to let us know,
Yeah, no, that'll be a big deal. But I'm very excited about the book and how it came together. The concept I originally had for it and what it eventually became, it's one of those things where you just never think you're going to get to that point, and then you kind of get there. And that's kind of how I feel about the book.
Okay.
So you finished that. Anything in the works for after that one?
So, Joan, I have, so the Actor and the Musician is a trilogy, and I have finished the third book for that.
Ah.
I also have a completed collection of poetry.
Wow.
That we don't necessarily know where that's going to go and fit in. I'm currently working on a shorter work, a novella. which I kind of have fallen into that area, which it's not enough to keep it on a short story, but it's not enough to be a book. And I kind of like that format. And I've done one previous to that as well. And then I have another one that's really in the computer world that I'll call it, I've drafted it. Like it's written, but it's like, it's not at the other point. But I kind of became, again, in our mind's perspective of going deep into the internet. And I've heard it called the dark web.
Oh yeah.
But not, but how much could we create a reality within the internet that we could live in? And if you just extend that a little farther, if you could live in it, could there be those that create it so that there is a world within the internet that you stay within?
Interesting.
So those are the things that I'm working on. I'm also there is a script for The Actor, which I wrote a while ago. I was actually in Hollywood pitching that a number of years ago, and I still believe it's a movie. Like it just has the elements of that, and I've had a lot of people tell me that. So we're still throwing around that. So now, with that screenwriting experience, I decided that I would go ahead and I'm always fascinated by space. So I'm writing kind of an adaptation of what would happen if we really went to Mars. Like, what would that really look like? It was inspired a little bit from Away, from the Netflix series that went on. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of disappointed by how they put it together. And I said, I don't think that's how we're going to go to Mars. I put it more like how Columbus came and discovered the world. How do we go to other worlds? It's usually not a call it kumbaya relationship, right?
Not kumbaya at all.
Right?
Well, we were talking about that a little bit in the pre-show with abductees and UFOs, yes, and all that. Right. It is not, I repeat, not a kumbaya relationship.
No. I have to go and get some battery power from my phone.
Okay, we're gonna take a short commercial break anyway.
Beautiful.
Our second break. So
we'll be right back, folks. Let him get battery, and you'll hear a word from our wonderful sponsors. Be right back.
Welcome to Magnolia Bluff, Texas, a small town in the heart of the Texas Hill Country near Burnett Reservoir. A town where everyone's business is discussed at the local coffee shop. A town where neighbors look out for each other. A town not insulated from murder and mayhem. Which begs these questions. Who is responsible for breaking into quaint Victorian homes? And how are poodles, ghosts, drug cartels, and a Ponzi scheme connected with a serial killer? Caroline McCluskey, the town's librarian, catalogs books using the Dewey Decimal System. When a black and white poodle puppy arrives unannounced, she calls him Dewey. Now, Caroline must catalog events to identify a serial killer in her town. Pick up your copy of the Dewey Decimal Dilemma, now available on Amazon.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Behold, this one about a man, a woman, a black jaguar, and an ancient Maya legend. Two Faces of the Jaguar is a novel by George Dismukes that will take you deep into the jungle and capture your imagination until the last word. Two Faces of the Jaguar is book one of a trilogy. Two Faces of the Jaguar, where only the adventurous dare to read.
Two Faces of the Jaguar, The Lost City, and The Jaguar's Quest are available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Two Faces of the Jaguar, the book people are talking about. Get your copy today.
In a world where advancing technology is outpacing crime solving, the O'Rourke team continues their relentless pursuit of justice. Bioprints is the first book in the O'Rourke crime novel series where it's high-tech crime versus old-fashioned detective work. Visit carternovels.com or amazon.com and check out Bioprints today.
We're back.
Hey, we noticed a change there.
Yes, I've had to make some alternative changes to get my phone to charge here. So
that's fine.
Not a problem.
That's really good.
Not a problem. It's still you.
We're just glad that you're back.
Yeah. We're almost a little worried there for a second. But anyway, let's see. Along the lines of what we were just talking about, I wanted to ask you, pick your brain a little bit about how did the publishing process go for you as far as when you started? What was that like for you? What process did you go through?
Well, I kind of gone down all the roads that I could possibly go through. So I won't go through all that story. There were a lot of things in getting the actor published that took a lot of time to do. But eventually, because I kind of got to the point, Rob, that I just never thought it was going to happen. I'd been rejected numerous times and just countless times. So what ended up happening is around 2011, so I'm going to say we took our daughter out to go to school out here. We lived in Toronto at that time. And during that trip, I was in a hotel room one night, and I found the publisher that I ended up publishing it with via online. And so I go, okay. And the actor was what I thought was all about ready to go. Of course, it wasn't. And so they liked it. They were excited about it, but they said, you kind of need to make it a lot shorter. So I'm going to say about 18 months from that point, I started to, because the actor, I'd always loved the story of it. And I had to just about have it. Like,
ooh,
wow.
It was, it was quite a process to go through. And so by the time I got there, I worked with a number of, I'll call it counsel people, like people counseling me with around writing and giving me different ideas on what would work. And we finally got it done till it came out in April of 2013. And that was a milestone time. I was very excited. And I was then getting to the point of what am I going to do here? Because I was burning the candle at both ends. I was literally coming home and working till midnight. I'd be getting up at 5 o'clock, going to work for the whole day, but I would be writing at both ends of those. And so a number of things came together. I still remember the meeting that happened where I was working, and it corresponded with the time where, well, Doug, we'd like you to take over this department where I was working. And I said, well, what happens if because I was kind of looking at this as, here I'm being offered my out. And I said, go on Amazon and look up the actor. So they did, and they stopped. They said, oh, there's a book here with an author that's got your name on it. And I said, well, that's my book. And that's the reason. And that was really, I was actually seeing it kind of as, I'll say, God's answer to my question was, here it is. And so that's when I literally switched and became full-time acting. And
We lost our connection here.
We seem to have lost our connection, and that's too bad.
You got me?
You're back.
You got me?
Yep, we got you.
And so what ended up happening is I just went. I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it, and that's how it started. And it kind of went from there. So you have the social media world. I worked with the promoter, publicist. And then I started doing book signings. And that took me across Canada and different parts of the United States. I ended up doing over 400 book events.
Wow.
In-person book events type of thing, literally be somewhere every weekend. During that time, I had The Driving came out the next year. And then in 2018, The Musician came out. And then about 350 book events into it, believe it or not, I met my agent that I have today at a book event.
Wow.
But it took 350 events to finally do that. All along, I'd been trying to do that. And so now we're kind of excited about, okay, how are we going to put all this together? And so that's what, and then the pandemic hit,
Yeah.
which changed the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so now this is why I said on Friday was a pretty exciting event for me, because that's my new book. And now it's time to go and see where we're going to take it. So that's kind of what, a little bit longer story, probably, Rob, than you were anticipating.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of expecting that.
But but in over the pandemic, it's been a very creative time where I've been able, like I said, to do the books that I described from the last book of the trilogy to a number of other works. So it's been a kind of a crazy time, but very creative to me. It's been very fun to get to do what I wanted to do.
So do you have any suggestions for authors as far as events to go to, venues, as far as going to try to do book signings? It's kind of a big question mark out there, I think, for a lot of people. Did you search out a lot of bookstores at a time, or?
So I was really adamant about not doing book events.
Whoops.
I'm the guy that goes in a bookstore and I head to a bookshelf. I don't want to be interrupted by somebody trying to sell their book or whatever. But I went into this bookstore in Toronto, Indigo Books, which is the national book chain here in Canada, Chapters Indigo. Found a guy and he kind of stopped me. He says, have you ever thought of doing book signings? So I had my whole thing about why you don't do book signings, and he wasn't having any of it. He says, where else are you going to go? Spend a few hours, talk to a few people, potentially find some readers, have people see your book, get to know the author, and maybe even sell a few books. And hearing that in that way immediately just changed my whole perspective on it. So the next weekend, I literally did my first book event. And his was the first I booked, but it was months later. So this was like August of 2013. So about 4 months after the actor had come out. And literally, I didn't know really anything to do. So I just picked up the phone and started phoning bookstores.
Yeah.
And so now I see, when I'm on Instagram and stuff, I see a lot of people doing it. But that's what I did. And I mean, I put a lot of kilometers on my car. And living in Toronto, I mean, I went from, I would fly out to the West Coast to do events here in BC. But I would drive, I drove all the way to Halifax, Charlottetown, Burlington, Vermont, all those different places to do the book events. And I think really, I think I mentioned in a bio, I think we've sold 15,000 books, books, not ebooks, but actual books.
Yeah.
Which I find, I'm hearing is a pretty good number. But it was a lot of doing exactly that. But the pandemic did shut a lot of that down.
Yeah.
Kind of got
for a while.
So
I kind of say to people today when I'm asked that question, do everything.
Yeah.
If you think you're often I'll hear, I was just asked this question yesterday. Well, I don't really think I need to do anything. And when I hear that, it's like,
okay.
This is a new person.
Someone will find my book on Amazon, right? I don't think so.
No, not going to happen.
One in a gazillion.
Yeah, you need to be on social media and you need to be out there.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's really funny.
it's what you got to do, right? You got to go out and do it, and you have to do it, and it's probably more important today than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Oh,
But,
and I think it's very
social
difficult.
media.
I think it's very difficult to publicize yourself. I think that's hard. I think that's difficult people to do.
It's one of those things that I think when you get to there, you have to get over it. It's just, I am not that person, like, believe me. But I mean, you look at Stephen King promotes his stuff.
James
Margaret
Patterson
Atwood promotes her stuff.
James Patterson puts on an Easter bunny suit to sell his children's books. You know, come on. Everybody has to do it.
And so I think those are all challenges that you just have to deal with, and you go forward, and you just, it's people used to say, well, you're on Twitter and you got your followers on Twitter. How many books have you sold on Twitter? I don't really know. So why are you on Twitter?
Right. Right.
I think we've lost the
Okay.
Are you back? I think we may have lost the connection for real.
We may have it. Are you
there?
Are
you still there?
Can you hear us?
No. It's frozen. But yeah, self-promotion I think is really difficult.
It is.
And we're raised to be humble.
Right? That's the worst part.
But it's something we all have to do, whether we like it or not.
Right. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
can you hear us, Doug? No.
Nope. Okay, he's going to go do some magic here, and hopefully we'll get him back on.
And that noise that you were hearing, I think, is part of the connection problem when he had to change to find a different place. So it wasn't aliens talking in the background like click, on signs.
Click, click, click,
click. Click, click, click. It sounded like on signs, but it wasn't. It was just a bad connection. No.
Not back yet? No?
No.
Okay.
Well, let's take this time to say who we're going to see next week.
Yeah, next week we're going to repeat that here. We're going to, and hopefully Doug will come back on here before we leave. But Jen Braxma.
Are you there? No.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, we have Jen Braxma in Evangeline's Heaven is going to be on. This book, I believe, is coming out it's already out, I believe, at this point. Or maybe not. Yeah. No, it wouldn't be out yet. I'm having a little crisis here on my own. Published. It was published on August 30th. I knew I read that somewhere. So it is out. It is available at all the book retailers. And I'm sure Amazon's included in that.
Yeah.
And it's basically the dynamic between good versus evil. But that'll be next Wednesday, November 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time here in the U.S. And are you able to hear us, Doug, yet? I don't think so. Okay. All right. So I guess maybe we should wrap up. What do you think?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm sorry we didn't get to say goodbye to Doug, but maybe he'll come back on here in the meantime. Can you hear anything yet? No?
However, thank you very much for being on the show. You've been a delightful guest.
And you can come back on. We'll be sitting here for a little while after the show anyway are you there now? No, we just don't have any sound, do we? Okay. Well, remember, stay tuned. After this show, go over to Voice of Indie podcast on Blog Talk Radio. With Beam Weeks and Stephen G's. We're going to play a little commercial for them right now. And Doug, if you can hear us, stay right where you're at, and until we come back to you. Okay? And let's see here. Get into that. Okay. And okay, until next time, folks.
That's all, folks.
Live Every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen Gees welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DB.com.
You've been listening to WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows.